First Person is produced in cooperation with the Far East Broadcasting Company, who rejoice in the stories of changed lives through the power of Jesus Christ. Learn more at febc.org.
When I'm interacting with a very unchurched, unsaved world in the streets of Chicago and other parts of the world, that's where I really, when I'm discipling or baptizing people, that's really where my heart is most passionate.
He's the outgoing president of the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. Mark Jobe is our guest on this edition of First Person. Welcome, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Mark was our guest 7 years ago when he became the 10th president in the history of Moody, and now he'll be leaving at the end of this month to follow God's call back into full-time pastoring, church planning, and evangelism. We'll hear more about his decision as you stay tuned. If you've missed any of our interviews the past few months or want to go back even longer into the audio archive, you could do that at firstpersoninterview.com. We've made it possible to scroll through the list of past interviews where you can listen at your convenience. Again, it's found at firstpersoninterview.com, or you have the option to join us via our podcast. Well, let's hear from Mark Jobe. When he became Moody's president, I came alongside him to serve as co-host of his radio program Bold Steps, which is going to continue past his presidency. So we've had many, many conversations. Let's listen now. Here's Mark Jobe.
Well, 7 years ago, we had not spent nearly as much time in the studio as we have now.
That's right. You have a lot of programs behind us, don't we?
We do, yeah. You know, Wayne, I think back and I was stepping into a chapter that was a little bit uncertain because I'd been a pastor for many years, church planter, but the whole area of higher education, of media, of publishing, of aviation was foreign to me.
You weren't seeking the job, were you?
I was not seeking the job. No, it actually came as a surprise. When the person called me up, I heard the message. And I told my wife laughingly, hey, Moody called me up to consider presidency. And I laughed. And she looked at me and she said, why are you laughing? And I said, well, I love Moody, but I don't want to be the president of Moody. I'm a pastor, evangelist, church planter. And she really looked at me and she said, you should pray about it. And I've learned over the years, Wayne, listen to your wife and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, you forgot the premise that the voice of God very often sounds like your wife, right?
And you know, my wife was deeply influenced by the ministry of Moody Bible Institute. Even as a little girl, her father was the first in his family to come to Christ, and he would sneak off to go to this little mission that was run by Moody students that were doing their practical Christian ministry there. And so as a little girl, my wife always was really impressed by Moody students. And then later on in their house, Moody radio was always on. And she always thought one day I'd love to go to Moody, but she got into her career. And later on, she was able to go. So she had a deep appreciation for this ministry. And so I said yes. So we started praying about it, fasting about it, and felt like, here's the sense that we got from God. I will give you clarity in the process. 4 months down the road, it was crystal clear that God was saying, this is what I want you to do. And so out of a sense of obedience, not out of a sense of, yes, this is what we want to do, but out of a sense of obedience, we said, yes, we will do this.
Right. But at the same time, it was a calling that didn't require you to leave the pastorate, which is a pretty unique situation for the presidency of Moody Bible Institute, to be bivocational, so to speak.
It is. What I struggled with is that I didn't feel like my assignment as a pastor was over, but yet I felt like God was saying yes to this new assignment. So I talked to the board and I said, I'm ready to say yes to Moody, but I don't feel like my assignment as pastor is over. So if I can continue to function in a pastoral role, my full-time job was Moody. My volunteer job, so to speak, was pastoring a megachurch.
Yeah. Actually, several locations. How many locations for New Life Community?
So we have 25 locations, 44 worship services in Chicago.
All within the Chicago area.
Yeah, and then we have 10 overseas as well, and also a non-for-profit with about 200 people employed called New Life Centers that works with at-risk youth in Chicago. So, this is a small ministry. It's a big ministry, but it's been a beautiful I think it's been a beautiful marriage. My full-time job has been Moody Bible Institute, but pastoring has helped me keep the pulse on Chicago, the people.
Well, it was always said that Moody in Chicago, downtown Chicago, was a laboratory for students for evangelism, and I would think the same principle applies to pastoring a church. I mean, it became, its own ministry, of course, but also a laboratory for experience that you could pour into the students here.
Absolutely. And so during the week, I'm dealing with people that are training for ministry, theology professors, systematic theology. And on the weekends, in the heart of Chicago, sometimes putting my arm around some tatted up 25-year-old that hasn't been to church almost at all in their life, and leading them to Jesus. And so it's two very different worlds, but at the same time, these worlds collide together.
Yeah. Well, as time permits, I may have a few more questions about that, but let's acknowledge the fact that you are now being called of God to leave the presidency of Moody Bible Institute, which is a bold move in itself, isn't it? I mean, this is the kind of job that really typically lasts a long time in a person's life. It does.
And when I said yes to this assignment, I had a sense that it was a temporary assignment. And but Moody had gone through a difficult time at that season, and I felt part of my desire was that I would leave Moody at a better place than it was. It had gone through some major transitions, kind of a crisis. And
a lot of organizations have seasonal changes that become a challenge from time to time.
And so it is a bold step in a different direction, but people that know me and know my heart aren't surprised. And I wanted to do it carefully. My wife and I've told many people, I started as a fan of Moody. I'm leaving a super fan of Moody. I've learned to appreciate the complexity of this ministry that literally touches millions of lives, not exaggerating, but tens of millions of lives. Seminary and undergrad in Chicago and Plymouth and aviation school in Washington and a media ministry with just, hundreds of outlets and a publishing. It's a complex ministry, but at the heart, to train people to live on mission and to spread the gospel.
Yeah.
And it's been a beautiful experience for me.
We're being heard right now in some of those media radio outlets, but we're also being heard on many others around the country. And for them, it may be an introduction to Moody Bible Institute. You are returning to the pastorate full-time, and church planning is a big part of what your vision is, right?
Yes.
Okay. Before we go there, and I do want to talk about that, but let's stay on your presidency, your 7 years at Moody. That means that you saw, 2 generations of students from freshman to graduation. What did you learn from them? What did they teach you?
Yeah. Well, one of the people asked me, what was your highlight at Moody? And I respond very quickly, the students. My job really isn't the students in the sense of, I'm not part of student life. I'm not a professor. But really the heart of Moody, the institute, the school, is the students.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that this is a generation that wants to live not just half-heartedly, but with passion all out. I've been inspired with the sincerity, the commitment, the willingness to give themselves to something that's bigger than who they are. I love the students' passion for the marginalized and the forgotten. I love this generation's heart for worship and the presence of God, a strong desire for authenticity, not very lured by just religion or security, but they want their lives to matter. And I'm walking away very encouraged by what God is raising in this next generation.
Mm-hmm. So their enthusiasm in many ways inspired you.
Yes.
To stay on the mission for your life and God's calling for you.
Absolutely. And, if I were to just do an assessment of what I really get passionate about is I'm very passionate about evangelism. D.L. Moody himself, he started multiple schools and God used him. He didn't run those schools because his real passion was evangelism, but he saw the importance of training. Mm-hmm. And I feel a little bit that same heart of D.L. Moody. I see the huge importance of training and the education, the classroom. But really my heart beats strongest when I'm interacting with a very unchurched, unsaved world in the streets of Chicago and other parts of the world. That's where I really, when I'm preaching and see people come to Christ and where I'm discipling or baptizing people, that's really where my heart is most passionate.
We're talking with Mark Jobe about following God's call, and we'll continue this conversation as you stay with us now on First Person.
I'm Ed Cannon of the Far East Broadcasting Company. Did you know that there are billions of people who still haven't heard the gospel? We're doing everything we can to change that by using radio and digital media to give the hope of Jesus to people in hard-to-reach places. In over 50 countries and with 152 languages, FEBC listeners can hear about a loving God, and millions respond. To learn more about FEBC and all that's being done, please visit febc.org. That's febc.org.
My guest is Dr. Mark Jobe, Pastor Mark Jobe, outgoing president of the Moody Bible Institute. I want to talk more about that calling. We hear testimonies each week on this program of people whose lives have turned around by Christ, and then He calls them into something specific vocationally. It could be something very simple and yet profound because it's what God has for them. And that's the way I look at your calling too. You're doing something that only you can do because God has called you to do it, nobody else, right? With your personality and your contacts, your network, so to speak. So you're going back into the pastorate and church planting. Tell me more what that's going to look like.
My wife and I had a conversation with someone that said, you're leaving Moody to go pastor a church? They said, isn't that like a demotion? That, you're... And I chuckled to myself and I said, following your God-given call and passion is never a demotion. It's the center of what God wants you to do.
That is so important to hear.
My parents, they left this country and went to a city that had no gospel witness at all. And literally my dad pastored in a horse stable, a very small place. And you would look at what he did, and here in the U.S., he had a lot of opportunities for churches, and he was invited to preach at a lot of places, but yet he ended up in a horse stable in northern Spain. But never did I hear him feel like this was his passion. This is what he wanted to do, and I saw him fulfilled and content. In the world's eyes, it was like, hey, what are you doing here? But he knew his calling. And I have a same sense of I know my calling. I know what I'm passionate about. I know what God has put on my heart to do. I love my time at Moody. And I knew this was God's assignment for this season. And it's been a phenomenal time here at Moody. But I know that my assignment is done. And it's time to throw myself into the area that I'm most wired for and passionate about.
Yeah. Must be offensive to God when we say he's just a missionary or just a pastor. I mean, that's terrible, isn't it? The churches you pastor, I'm thinking of those, 20-some churches in the Chicago area. Most of them are very urban churches, aren't they? So you minister in an urban environment.
It is an urban environment. It's a very multi-ethnic, multicultural. We're in a bunch of different neighborhoods. Some of them are immigrant community neighborhoods. Others are more gentrified, upscale. There's a mixture of people. So our congregation is very diverse, multi-ethnic, and reaching a lot of different, what I call the city's full of tribes that you're reaching in different languages and styles, but all that need Jesus.
But that's a challenge, but you welcome the challenge.
I love the challenge. In fact, New Life is a very unique, I call it a movement church. We started with 18 people in Back of the Yards neighborhood, and now we have in person about 6,000 people that meet on Sunday mornings, plus thousands of others that join us online and audio. And a great majority of those people have come to Christ through this ministry. And there's a first generation. This is the church that led them to Christ.
Yeah. So do they come from a church background at all?
Well, Chicago, a lot of people in Chicago, because of its both European background and Central South American, you have a lot of people that are what I would say nominal Catholics. Most of the people I talk to haven't gone to church in a long time, but they were maybe baptized as a Catholic, but haven't read their Bible, don't know much about it. They're lapsed Catholics, a lot of Chicago is.
Some people refer to them as cultural Christians.
Cultural Christians.
When they're asked, are you a Christian? Let's say yes, because my mother sent me to Sunday school when I was a kid.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they have a Bible but haven't read it. Typically, they haven't gone to church in years and have disconnected spiritually. They believe in God but don't know much about God. And so we're seeing a huge openness to the gospel right now in people that are looking to the heavens and saying, I need God.
So what brings them to church?
It's interesting. Lately, a lot of 20-somethings, early 30s, what drives them is a sense of life is somewhat empty. Sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's loneliness, sometimes it's a sense of I need community, oftentimes a sense of I need greater purpose. And I haven't always seen that before, but I'm seeing that now. I've had conversation after conversation after conversation with people that say, I just woke up one day and said, I need something in life. And I started Googling churches, spirituality, found you guys online, don't know anybody, but just showed up because I know I need something. So I think the Lord is stirring some people up these days in an unusual way.
It's not unusual in your services to see people come to Christ every week, I understand.
Absolutely. In fact, over the last 24 months, we have led to Christ, mentored, and baptized over 1,100 people. 2 weeks ago, we baptized 70 people. In fact, at the location that I'm at, we'll do a baptism the first Sunday of every month. But because we have so many people coming to Christ and getting baptized, we've actually recently moved it to twice a month doing baptisms just because we can't keep up with the number of people that are saying, yes, I want to follow Jesus.
Yeah. One of the stories that you and I have talked about for the past 7 years is how bold you are in presenting Christ and all that means in a person's life, the change that has to happen in their life to follow Christ. Many times you have unmarried couples living together in your church, and you're not shy about saying, "Hey, that can't continue."
That's right. There's a lot of people that are just living together. In fact, just this Sunday, I preached. A young couple came up to me, and he wanted prayer. I could tell they were newer because he referred to me as father. So I know that he doesn't come from an evangelical background.
You weren't wearing a collar, huh?
I wasn't wearing a collar.
Okay.
And but I could tell he was sincere. He wanted prayer. And so he was with the girl, and I said, "Are you dating? Are you married?" He said, "No, she's my girlfriend." I said, "How long you been dating?" He said, 12 years. I said, "So you live together, right?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "And who's dragging their feet on getting married?" And she looked up at him. He was a big guy too, and he said, "I am." I said, why? He said, I don't know. I'm just afraid. I said, you know what? She deserves more than being your living girlfriend after 12 years. And you deserve to do this God's way. So you need to properly propose to her and stop letting fear dominate your life and ask God to do it your way. And he responded. He said, thank you. And she was very thankful. I have this conversation usually a couple times a month where especially young men, they've seen bad marriages. They are afraid, I think, that they're going to blow it. There's no compelling reason to drive them to marriage. But when they start to do things God's way, they wake up to, hey, if I'm going to really follow God, my relationship needs to exemplify this as well. So over and over, we have people getting baptized and getting married within the same month. Because
you've conducted some of those services.
Oh, yeah, a bunch of them. I've done a lot of those services. And at one time, we actually married 6 couples at one time that had all been living together, decided we need to do this God's way. And so I'll walk into service and a girl will say, Pastor, we did it. And she'll show me her engagement ring or her married ring, or a guy will come up to me and say, thank you, Pastor, you told us. And they'll show me the picture of their wedding. And I think this generation is not afraid of being boldly challenged to make the right decision. Some young men need a man to say, step up to the plate, show some leadership. And they've oftentimes haven't had a man in their life to challenge them to do what's right before God.
Well, we appreciate your ministry, and now you're going to go back to it, not only as a pastor, but as a church planter and encourager of other pastors who have stepped into leadership while you've been president of Moody as well, including your son, by the way.
Yes.
Mark, is there a particular passage or story of Scripture, a verse, a passage that just has meant the most to you through the years? You've claimed it as your own personal
So many passages,
guide.
But I have one underlined in my father's Bible, and it's in my office here at Moody, the Bible that was given to him when he was 15 or 16 years old. He's got it underlined, and it's a familiar passage, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. And I've always been happy that I said, okay, God, if you lead, we're willing to follow, even if it looks like it's harder than where we were. And God always, and not only, it's not just this dread, okay, I'll obey you. I believe that God always gives you joy and grace in the process as well.
Well, what a great finish to a conversation with Mark Jobe, who's wrapping up his tenure as president of Moody Bible Institute. He'll be leaving his office at the end of this month, and you're encouraged to pray for the one who will become Moody's 11th president. If you'd like to re-listen to this interview or share it with a friend or family member, please copy the link at firstpersoninterview.com. And if you've never subscribed to our podcast edition, I invite you to do that easily using any podcast app on your phone or digital device. Just search for First Person with Wayne Shepherd. And we receive helpful support from the Far East Broadcasting Company. I hope you'll want to learn more about its radio media ministry. Just go to febc.org for great stories of how God is using this ministry. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us next time for First Person.